Welcome back to Coast Sports, the only show for the fans, by the fans. I'm Michael Fiumefreddo, and we got one more day left here in this dreadful year of 2020. But amongst all the drama, all the cancellations of games, all the delaying of seasons, we had a great year in sports, and a lot went on. So definitely a lot to be thankful for. The NFL is finally coming to a close this season. The playoffs should be starting, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The NBA is underway. The MLB offseason is getting pretty interesting. We'll start off by talking about the Padres over there, getting Blake Snell and Yu Darvish into their pitching staff. That's a big win for them. And a team that's looking to compete, they look really good right now. Other than that, though, I promised you I'd talk about the NBA getting started. We're a week into the season, and we've seen some interesting things so far. But we did have our fantasy football championship over the weekend. And, of course, history repeats itself, and Brandon Caridi is the 2020 Money League champion. He pulled off the upset this week against our good friend Michael O'Brien, who at 10-3 came in first place overall. His first year in the Money League, and just had a phenomenal season as well. But all in the end, it came down to who set the better lineup. And this week it happened to be Brandon. And if you go back and watch our Casual Saturday show on Spotify, the three of us had a little conversation. I did suggest to both of them different lineups that could have made this game a little bit more interesting. But there you have it. Brandon's the Money League champion by a score of 139-66 to 107-78. Anyway, we have a lot of news to cover going on in the NFL. We got one more week left to go in the regular season of real football action. But other than that, the NBA is just getting underway, and I really wanted to talk about some of my knee-jerk reactions to these for this first week of the season. And we'll start off with one where I was kind of wrong at the start of the season, and that's that the Nets have been a lot better than advertised. Now, we knew they had Kyrie Irving. They had Kevin Durant. They made the playoffs the past two seasons without either of them. But this year is a little different, and right now they are on a two-game losing streak. I will point that out, but I was kind of wrong about them. I thought this team would kind of flame out early on. Who's going to get the ball? Who's going to get all the touches? But Kevin Durant and Kyrie, they've played phenomenal together. We'll start off with them. Kyrie Irving, and shout out to my good friend Christian Venditti. He's been on the show, big Jets fan. He called earlier in the year that Kyrie Irving would be the MVP of the league this year. And right now, that's not so obscure of an opinion. Right now, he's averaging 30 points a game to 6 assists. Just playing great as a facilitator there. The team's playing at a high level. And Kevin Durant as well, the guy that's the go-to on this team, or at least I think he is, isn't having a bad year coming off of a surgery. He is averaging 27 points per game as well. Now, I was wrong about this team, and I will admit that already, although there's a lot more season left to play. But those first two games, the blowout against Golden State on the season opener, and then followed that up with a blowout of the Boston Celtics, a very high-level team in the Eastern Conference on Christmas Day. This team looks like they're ready to go and ready to make a title push. They did lose Spencer Dinwiddie for a portion of the season with a torn ACL, but hopefully they get him back for the playoffs, and it'll be a lot different. Now, I want to talk about some other guys that are playing at high levels, and although his team is in a rebuilding year, James Harden is putting on a showcase for himself. Right now, he's averaging 39 points per game this season, including a 44-point double-double this past weekend against the Spurs. Now, the reason I would say he's playing at an MVP level as well, but the team is just not playing well. First off, they had their season opener postponed against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that was due to Harden's own breaking of the COVID protocols. And we won't get into the reason why, but the team is 0-2 right now, And it's still no secret that James Harden wants out. We talked about this earlier. There's a lot of teams that he preferred to go to, the Nets being one of them, the Philadelphia 76ers as well, the Miami Heat. And all those teams were playoff teams last year, and they'd have to give up a significant portion of their team or a great player to add a guy like James Harden. Now, looking at the teams that are still on his, I guess, docket or whatever for playing in those for teams that he wants to go to, the Brooklyn Nets, I don't think they'd trade Kyrie for him. Kyrie, like I said, is playing at an MVP level. Ben Simmons, on the other hand, in Philadelphia, the way James Harden's playing right now, I don't see why not. You know, he wants out. He's a guy that can do stuff with the ball in his hands. They know they can get a great usage rate out of him if they lose Joel Embiid, and they know that they can win games with him. So I think he would be a guy that the Philadelphia 76ers, who right now they're in the playoffs, but definitely going to be a fight for a top seed in the East. And adding a guy like James Harden, who's been to the NBA Finals before, been to the playoffs, could just be something interesting to add to this team. And I think it'll go a long way. I don't know when James Harden will be traded, but I think he will be. And it's definitely something to look out for. And keep watching him to see if he's playing at a high level, because I think he'll continue that one. Another guy that's really standing out is Zion Williamson. First overall pick out of Duke last season. Missed a lot of the year with a knee injury, but although he missed some portion of the year and Ja Morant played at a very high level, there was an argument that even like 19 games was enough for Zion Williamson to win Rookie of the Year. And he's showing that right now. Right, he's averaging 21 points per game with 9 rebounds. Playing great on both sides of the ball, and definitely at an all-star level. Brandon Ingram's still kind of the guy right now, but I think it's almost Zion's turn. And when you look at the way he's playing right now, New Orleans at 2-2, they're fighting for a playoff spot. They're trying to get back in the competitive West. And yeah, he's definitely on the list for most improved right now, if not an all-star consideration. So Zion Williamson, I think we have a future star of the league, and definitely stood out in last year's rookie class. Now, speaking of rookie classes, this year's a lot different. You know, previously we had guys like Zion, like Ja Morant, who were all-star considerates. Luka Doncic 2 years ago. Ben Simmons even years back. These guys, this rookie class is not even close to those levels. You got guys like Anthony Edwards, the #1 overall pick, who's got 15 points a game right now for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And then you just got other guys that Tyrese Halliburton on Sacramento is playing really well, but that's mainly because they have him as a 12th or a late round pick. And he's just showing off what he can do there. But the rest of this rookie class, guys like James Wiseman, LaMelo Ball, I haven't really seen anything out of. And I think that might have something to do with the fact that there was no summer league. Keep in mind, they did join these teams like 2 months ago, or less than that, even 1 month. But definitely not enough time to really develop, really get in place with these teams. And I guess it's just showing there's a lot of time for these guys to really make their mark on the NBA, but right now they're not really playing at the high level. Could just be some growing pains. You know, we're only 4 games in. Let's not get too crazy on our predictions. But I did notice that even the bubble season that ended in October, a lot of the teams that are in the playoff race right now, that are at the top of the standings right now after 4 games, just don't look the same. Let's start off with the Western Conference, because they had a majority of teams go. I think there were 13 total in the bubble. But you got guys like the New Orleans Pelicans. This was yesterday. The Pelicans lost yesterday, so they're not at the top anymore. Teams like they didn't make the bubble. But then let's look at the teams that did. Houston 0-2. Oklahoma City made a big trade they traded away Chris Paul. They're 1-2. Denver 1-2 as well. Same with Dallas. The Lakers right now at 2-2. All these teams at the bottom of the rankings right now. And I think that just goes with fatigue. And let's check out the Eastern Conference as well, because this one's even more crazy. You got teams like Orlando at the top. You got teams like Washington. They were in the bubble, but they're 0-4 right now. Same with Toronto, 0-3. Miami, the Eastern Conference champions last year, 1-2. And like I said, we're still very early in the season, but the fatigue is starting to kick in for these teams, and which is weird to say, we're only playing 3 games, but keep in mind, these guys had 2 months off. The rest of the league had 10 months off. So I think that's going to be a storyline to follow. How are these teams that didn't make the bubble going to play after a 10-month break, rather than how are the teams that did make the bubble going to play after 2 or 3 months break? However, I'm looking at these teams that didn't make the bubble, and I'm saying, you know what? A lot of these guys look good. We'll go back to the Western Conference right now. I said New Orleans is playing phenomenal basketball. Looking down at Sacramento as well, Minnesota. These guys are all playing really well with their young, talented rosters. Let's look at the East now, too, because, like I said, this is even more crazy. You got the same thing going on there. You got guys like Orlando, a team that hasn't really shown much. You got guys like the Knicks at 2-2. Let's look at Atlanta's undefeated. Who else we got? Cleveland's playing phenomenal at 3-1. They got the combination of Darius Garland and Colin Sexton at the guard positions. They've labeled themselves as Sexland. Just a funny name for them. But all these teams that are coming out of nowhere now, and it should be interesting to see how they do the rest of the season. Let's shift gears now to the end of a season, and we got some big news in the NFL world. And the biggest of them all came on Monday when Dwayne Haskins, the number 15 overall pick and Heisman finalist in 2019, was released from the Washington football team. Now, this has been a trend we've started to see with him. He was stripped from his captainship early on this season when he broke the COVID protocols. This week he played against Carolina. The team lost. He didn't do too well at all, and he was benched for Taylor Heineke and then cut on Monday. So there's 2 things that go into this. And the first one has to do with Justin Fields, his predecessor quarterback, or his successor quarterback back at Ohio State. Justin Fields is slotted to go in the top couple selections of the draft, maybe even as high as number 2. But right now, is a team really going to take a chance on another Ohio State quarterback knowing their history? Keep in mind, you got guys like Terrell Pryor that came out of there in 2010. Cardale Jones pretty recently back in 2015. J.T. Barrett as well. And now you throw Dwayne Haskins onto that list of teams that are players that have just been busts out of Ohio State at the quarterback position. I think a big thing that happens to do with this is the fact that Ohio State is just such a good football program that the quarterback doesn't even matter. They're going to make the quarterback look like the Heisman candidate. And Justin Fields, who last year I had as my Heisman winner before Joe Burrow ended up throwing for about 60 touchdowns, a lot of that really came from the fact that Chase Young on the other side of the ball was doing great things on defense. So it really helped out Justin Fields as well. We'll talk. They're playing in the Sugar Bowl this weekend on New Year's Day, and we'll get into that a little bit later on, but I don't know if a team's going to want to look at another Ohio State quarterback knowing their history. When you got guys like Kyle Trask out of Florida, Zach Wilson as well. Those guys could be much greater talents in the NBA knowing how they've performed at schools that maybe don't have enough talent. Maybe a team like the Jets is looking for a quarterback, which I hope they aren't, but they're not going to want a guy that's coming from a luxury of talent to a team that's got nothing. But moving on to that, the second reason I say this is a big for the Washington football team is if they win this weekend against the Philadelphia Eagles, they're in the playoffs. So who's going to get that done? Alex Smith still unsure if he's going to play this weekend. Do you have Taylor Heineke lead your team into the most important game of the season? I don't know. This guy really hasn't played that much this season. I think that was his first action. And I don't think he's played that much in his career either. So are you going to rely on him to bring you into the playoffs? Keep in mind, Dwayne Haskins back in week 1 beat the Philadelphia Eagles for their first win of the season. Now, what also goes into that is a guy like Alex Smith going to be your quarterback going into the playoffs. Is he going to be healthy, or would you want a guy that's much better situated than Taylor Heineke playing in this playoff situation? But moving on to the team that I like, the Jets. And it's sad to say, but we got another win this season, and now we've completely lost the first overall pick and a shot at Trevor Lawrence. Now, I talked about what would happen in that situation last week, but some good news might be on the horizon, and it's not New Year's Day yet, so I don't have my confetti streamers and all that equipment, but we might have to have a little bit of a party next week when Adam Gase finally gets fired. There's been some reports going around the league that on Monday after the game against the Patriots, they're going to part ways with him, and we'll never have to deal with Adam Gase again. However, though, there's been more links after this news broke that Adam Gase is going to take the quarterback's coach job at the Patriots. Now, knowing Adam Gase's history, the Jets fans should be cheering and jumping for joy at this news because whoever successes Cam Newton there is not going to have the best coach to really help him get through and develop. And we know Bill Belichick, what he can do with a quarterback as well, but who knows how long he'll be there as well. They're most like the next guy in line for that head coaching job, Josh McDaniels. He hasn't really performed well as a head coach and prefers to stay in New England, so it should be interesting to see if Adam Gase can redeem himself. But for Jets fans' sakes, we hope that doesn't happen and we end up being better than the Patriots because of it. It's crazy to say, right? But let's not talk about teams that are out. Let's talk about teams that are fighting for playoff position. And with 1 week to go, it should be very interesting because 2 divisions are up for grabs. All 3 wild card spots in both conferences are also up for grabs. And with 18 teams still in play, this should be a very interesting football Sunday. I know a lot of people don't really care for it. A lot of teams start to bench their best players, give them some rest for the playoffs, and there's no fantasy on for most people, but we're going to have a very interesting week, and I wanted to bring back my playoff picture or my playoff power rankings, whatever you want to call them. This is going to get a lot tighter next week, and I'm going to be a lot more strict with it. But there's still, like I said, 18 teams up for grabs. And in the competitive tier at the very bottom, I got all the NFC East darlings that are still alive and well. You know, we got Washington, like I said, they're taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. They win, they're in. It's that simple. Then you got the New York Giants taking on the Dallas Cowboys. And now this one, if Washington were to lose, which they're going to play on Sunday night, and this game's going to take place early on in the day. New York or Dallas needs a win and a Washington loss, and whoever gets that, they're in the playoffs. So definitely something to look out for. We got that game as well as the AFC South, the other division up for grabs. And I'll put this graphic back on the screen because the Titans, who I have in the contender category right now, hold that spot as the champions. They take on the Houston Texans, who they did beat in overtime last week. So this is more of a toss-up game than anything. But the Indianapolis Colts have a very good matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if they win that game, they're in the playoffs, most likely. And the reason I say most likely is because the AFC playoff race is very interesting right now. You got Tennessee at 10-5. You got Indianapolis at 10-5. You got Miami at 10-5. You got Cleveland at 10-5. And you got Baltimore at 10-5. So there's 4 spots technically. You could say 3 because one of those is going to go to either Tennessee or Indianapolis. But you got 4 or 5 teams fighting for 3 spots. Now let's look at the matchups. Baltimore's taking on the Bengals. That should be a no-brainer win for them. Although Cincinnati has played well, they've won their last 2 games. Pittsburgh, who hasn't been the greatest, is playing the Browns, who just lost to the Jets this past weekend. And Miami's taking on the Buffalo Bills, a divisional matchup, and that's going to decide. Buffalo's already in, but it's going to decide Miami's playoff fate. So Miami and Cleveland arguably have the toughest 2 matchups. Indianapolis has the easiest matchup. And we're just going to have to see if Baltimore or Tennessee can clutch up and get them into the playoffs. But all you need to know is one of those teams is going to have to lose, and one of those teams is going to get in. It should be even more interesting if 2 of them lose, because then there's going to be one or two 9-6 teams up for grabs, and we'll see what the tiebreakers are with that. Let's go back to the NFC, though, because Arizona and Los Angeles are both still, right now they're in the playoffs. If the season were to end after this week, they'd be there. But at 9-6 are the Rams, and 8-7 are the Arizona Cardinals. They play at 4:30. And whoever wins that game is going to, or whoever loses that game rather, is going to have to scoreboard watch a little bit, because in the 1 o'clock window, the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers are playing each other in Soldier Field in Chicago. Now, Chicago gets a win, they make the playoffs. So those guys are going to be watching the game. If Chicago were to lose, Arizona and Los Angeles are both in the playoffs. That game won't really matter. It will for seeding, though. But if Chicago were to win that game, pull off the upset, one of those teams is going home. So a lot of implications going on throughout the league. A lot of big games for a lot of young teams. And if I bring back these rankings, I think experience has the biggest thing to do with this year's playoff. There's a lot of new teams that we're seeing. Buffalo hasn't been there before. Tampa Bay, although they have Tom Brady, ending a playoff drought. Is Cleveland making the playoffs for the first time? Same with the Cardinals if they make it. Mitch Trubisky's been to the playoffs, but it's been a while. Of course, you got the Dolphins as well. And that whole NFC East is, a lot of them weren't even expected to get there. So just being in that situation is big for them. Now, I want to talk about a little bit of my favorites. It's going back to this rankings that we have. And Kansas City is at 3 now. And you might think that's weird because they're the best team right now record-wise. They haven't really shown any flaws, but I would argue that they have. And, Mahomes, who's right now leading most MVP races, has thrown 4 interceptions in his last game, including 3 against the Miami Dolphins. They haven't won in a blowout since then. And even last week against the Atlanta Falcons, who are tanking, they're not playing at their best level right now. Interim head coach, they only won by 3 points, put up 17 points. Now, everyone has their off days, but it's interesting to see, with 2 weeks left to go in the playoffs, a team like the Kansas City Chiefs with their firepower offense score only 17 points against a very weak Atlanta Falcons defense. Considering a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pulled Tom Brady at halftime because they were beating the Detroit Lions by so much. And they actually ended up winning that game 47-7. So it could be a momentum thing, but I don't think, or the Super Bowl hangover might be kicking in, but keep an eye on the Chiefs because a lot of people might pick them to win, and I don't think that's the case. But who do I think is going to win? If you saw it before, I had the Green Bay Packers at number 1. Now, this is a team that really hasn't shown me any flaws other than the fact that Aaron Rodgers is just a little bit up there in age. But even he's been playing at an MVP level. They just took down a playoff team in the Tennessee Titans. They won 40-14 on national television. So no strangers to prime time there. I think they're a team to watch out for. The Saints as well, and you know what I said about Tampa Bay last weekend. It should be interesting to watch. Now I'm just going to close out the show real quick. We got the college football playoff I mentioned on New Year's Day. Alabama, the number 1 seed, taking on Notre Dame, Clemson, and Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. I'll make my picks for this right now. Going to be rapid fire. I think Alabama blows out Notre Dame, and Notre Dame will probably go down. Sorry, Keith. Keith's over there watching, Notre Dame fan. I think Alabama wins this one to a blowout. They're a much better team. Great on both sides of the ball. They got probably the Heisman lock in Devontae Smith at wide receiver, and Mac Jones is also a Heisman finalist, their quarterback. I don't see this team losing. And then on the other side of the bracket, in the Sugar Bowl, I want to say Clemson, but like I said, Ohio State's just got that good of a all-around team that, we could see an upset here. I'm going to be safe and pick Clemson here, but don't be surprised. I think Ohio State, they're a lot more rested than Clemson is, only playing 6 games, and Dabo Swinney might throw a fit if they lose this game because he's the one guy that's outspoken about not having Ohio State in the playoffs just because of the amount of games they played. Now going into the championship, Alabama-Clemson, give me Alabama. We're going to have Brent come on Saturday for a Casual Saturdays episode. He's going to break down both games from a college football player's standpoint, as well as give our picks for whoever makes it to the college football championship, and we'll see how it goes then. But until then, I hope everyone has a happy new year. We'll see you on the flip side of the calendar. Once again, I'm Michael Fiumefreddo, signing off for the year on Coast to Coast Sports, the only show for the fans, by the fans.